Be'ezus Hashem, today's daf is daf Beis Amud Aleph in Masechta Gittin, the brand new Masechta. So I wanted to begin the Masechta by just bringing your attention how to read the Pesukim that discusses Gittin. It's in Parshas Kiseitze. Just to read it is very, very important to know how to read the Chumash. So we'll read it, and it's just a 4 Pesukim, and basically it's the overall Pesukim for Gittin and Kedushin. So let's see. The pasuk describes a story. It's a story. Ki yikach ish isha. If a man over bar mitzvah would take a woman. So we know Chazal tell us that doesn't mean you take a woman. You mekadesh a woman by giving her money. Uba'ala. It's amazing. I go to all the yeshivas and ask, how do you teach uba'ala? So most of them will teach, and he had beer with her. No, that's not the teach. In this context means or he did bia with her, or because you do either with mekadosh nisha, either by giving her money, or you do bia with her. There's a third one, which is we learned from Yatzav Haisa, is a pasuk that describes shtar. But anyway, so he's mekadosh nisha in a number of different ways, and then he did chuppah. If she doesn't find favor in his eyes anymore, why? Because she did something abominable. Let's say she had an affair with somebody, or she's a perutza. Then there's a mitzvah on the husband, because of law, sefer prisus. He should write a document that has the power to separate them and break up the kedushin. Now here is interesting that the word sefer in all of Torah Kula means a parchment, but there's a halacha l'Moshe Messini that allows the get to be written on anything. So the halacha l'Moshe Messini uproots what the literal meaning of the pasuk is. The pasuk says write it on a parchment, but we know it's the halacha l'Moshe Messini says you can write it on a leaf. So he writes this document on a parchment. V'nasam biyada, and gives it over into her hand. It doesn't mean dafka in her hand. He could even put it into her property. But he has to say that she's now sent away from his house, and that's how they break up the marriage. So the Torah continues the story. Let's say she left his house, and she went and she became engaged leish acher, to somebody else. So the yotza v'hoisa, by the way, is comparing Gittin to Kedushin. We'll learn more about that. But she went out of his house, and v'hoisa, and she married leish acher, a different type of man. Not a ish sheni, but it's an ich acher. This guy got rid of a very promiscuous woman from his house, and somebody else married her. So he's an acher. And the Torah sort of predicts what's going to happen, like a Hollywood marriage. Usneya ha'ish ha'acharon. This last man is going to hate her. And according to Rashi, he is the last man to be able to marry her if she gets a get from him. Because a woman who gets 2 gittin, it cannot marry for a third time. So Usneo Isha Achron, because of law sefer krisos, and if he's lucky enough, the second guy had the opportunity to write a get krisos for her, and he divorced her and gave it to her and sent her away from his house. But sometimes, he's unlucky. He married this promiscuous woman, and because he did such a thing, he's going to die first. This last man who took her as a wife will die. So the Torah tells you, this is a pasuk, you have to know how to read it. The Torah tells you that the first husband is not allowed to, not that he can't, but he is not allowed to, the first husband that already gave her a divorce, to return and take her again as a wife, so she should become his wife. That's the first thing the pasuk discusses. Then the Torah tells you, Achrei ashehu tamah. Achrei ashehu tamah is another topic, which means that if a woman is married, a woman is married and she had an affair with a married man, so then it's usher for a husband to continue to live with that woman. Because this is a disgusting before Hashem. So a woman who had an affair with another man, it's understood why they shouldn't remain married. A woman who got divorced and married somebody else and they got divorced from the second husband, the reason why the Torah says that this is disgusting by the Eibishter, maybe he rethought about it and wants to marry again. What could be so disgusting? because on the surface it looks like there's wife swapping going around. Somebody takes a wife in the morning, divorces her at night, retakes her again. So therefore, this is an issa to take a machzer grushasai after she married somebody else. And if you do that, you shouldn't bring sin to the Eretz Yisrael, because by one person doing such this abominable act, it permeates the ear of Eretz Yisrael, and everybody wants to do znus. So don't bring sin to the land that Hashem is giving to you. You see an interesting thing: one person could do an avera. He thinks he's only doing an avera in his own home, and he pollutes the entire ear of the land. So therefore, this is the little parsha over here that discusses Gittin. So now the Mishnah starts off. Now, one of the first questions you can ask: why don't we learn Masechta? In fact, if you're writing Seder Nashim, the first Masechta should be Masechta Kedushin. So, and not Gittin. Well, that's what many people ask that question. But you can see from the parsha is not giving you a parsha about Kedushin. It's a side point about Kedushin. The parsha just runs right into Gittin. So the main parsha discusses Gittin and what happens if a woman got two Gittin. So that's why Gittin comes first. But the other main reason is that they say that Yavamis and all the Masechtas leading up to this Masechta have progressively, or each one has one step decreasingly lower parakim in the Masechta. So, like Gittin will have less parakim than Soita, and Soita will have less parakim than Nazir. If you go back, you'll see each one has like a little bit more parakim till we get Kedushin, which only has 4 chapters so that's how it was lined up. Rebbe lined it up in Masechta Seder Nashim. Other than that, is the reason why Gittin comes first is that when a person Loyalenu gets a get, then we tell him, don't give up, go back into Kedushin. That's why we didn't end off saying the Nashim with Gittin, but no, Gittin. And if that happens, go back into Kedushin, find the right one for you. So the Mishnah, Hamevi get me Medina Sayam, someone who brings a get from Medina Sayam. Now the Mishnah, I don't know, it doesn't teach you how to write a get. Mishnah describes a case, and they figured that, might as well deal with common questions. So I think that's why the Mishnah starts off with this following case. A person who carries a get from Medina Siyam. In other words, a shliach, a husband wrote a get, let's say in Italy, for his wife, and the shliach took the get from Italy. He was getting on a boat to go to Eretz Yisrael. So he brought it from one of the countries in the sea, okay? And so when he arrives in Eretz Yisrael to give over this get to this woman, he has to say in front of Bezdin, in order for her to get married again, he has to say in front of Bezdin, b'fani nechtav, in front of me, this get was written, b'fani nechtav, and I saw it was signed. Now, he just can't walk over to her and give her the get. He has to go to get a group of 2 or 3 people and say, in front of me, it was written, in front of me, it was signed. Now, why is that? So we're going to see what the reason for that is in the Gemara. But if he doesn't do that, if the shliach doesn't do that, this woman cannot get married again. Now, the Mishnah said that the Tanakama holds that from Medinas Hayam, if he brought the get from the country, it must be, let's say, somewhere you have to cross the ocean or the seas to get to that country. But what happens if it's like outside Eretz Yisrael, but very close to Eretz Yisrael? According to the Tanakama, you would not have to say b'fani nechtam, b'fani nechtam. Rav Gamliel says, Af hamevi min harekem min hacheger. Even if you bring from this place called Rekem Cheger, which is very areas that are just right outside the borders of Israel. You cross over the border of Israel, it's like Mexico and the United States, you cross over, you have to say b'fani nechtam, b'fani nechtam. Rabbi Lezer says, Afilu mikfar ludim lelud. Even if it's from the town of Ludim to Lud. Let's say, imagine a sea, and inside the sea is a little candy, right? So that this area is swallowed up into Israel, but it's not Israel. Kfar Ludim is not in Israel. If you bring it from Kfar Ludim, Lulud, you also have to say b'fani nechtam, b'fani nechtam. So that's the shita of Rabbi Gamliel, Rabbi Lezer. Chachamim said not true. You do not have to bring. You don't have to say b'fani nechtam, b'fani nechtam. By these places, they're so close to Israel, you don't have to say b'fani nechtam. Ella, the only time is hamevi medinas yam. If a guy, if a shliach is coming, a messenger is coming from the overseas, and he's bringing a get for a woman who's living in Israel, only in that scenario he would have to say b'fani nechtam. Comes along the Mishnah, v'hamoilech. It goes in the other direction also. If you bring a get from Eretz Yisrael to Medina Sayyam, the Mishnah says you also have to say b'fani nechtam. It's not just if you bring it to Israel, but if you take one from Israel to Medina Sayyam. Now the Mishnah says, not only that, let's say you have two countries, which is really one country, like East and West Germany. So if you bring from one country to another country, which they have borders in between the two the two areas, the East and the West, so to speak. So since they're considered like two countries, and one cannot just easily pass through to the other, so in that case, you also have to say b'fani nechtam. In those cases, also you have to say b'fani nechtam. Rab Shimon ben Gamliel says, Afileh mehegmonya lehegmonya, to one government ship to another government ship. Even in one city, if they have two governors running one side to another side, you have to also say b'fani nechtam. So that's all the different opinions in the Mishnah. Comes along the Mishnah and wants to give you the borders of Israel. Rabbi Yehuda says, I'm going to tell you what the borders of Israel. Merekem lemizrach. From Rechem, which is just the city just outside Eretz Yisrael, and eastward, that's the eastern border of Israel. The Rechem kimizrach. Rechem is like east. In other words, Rechem is considered already chutz la'aretz. And again, if you bring a get from Rechem to Israel, you have to say b'fani nechta. Me Ashkelon l'darm. In the south, they had a city called Ashkelon, and Ashkelon is the southern border of Israel. The Ashkelon Kedarim, and Ashkelon has the halachas of it as if it's outside of Eretz Yisrael. So again, if you bring from Ashkelon to Eretz Yisrael, you have to say b'fani nechta. Me Akoy l'tzafon. In the north part of Israel, the border is Akoy, right? And what is the city Akoy itself? Akoy ketzafon. Akoy is like the northern part of the world, which is outside of Eretz Yisrael. So if you bring from Akoy to Israel, you have to say b'fani nechta. So we have south, we north, south, east. What about west? So west, the western side of Israel is the ocean, the Mediterranean Sea. But not just if you go into the Mediterranean Sea, that's not chutz la'aretz, because you draw a line from Hermon all the way down to Nachal Mitzrayim to like the Wadi of Egypt. So the first area is of the Mediterranean Sea is Israel, but beyond that already it's chutz la'aretz. But that was known. So the Mishnah doesn't discuss the western part of Israel. Rab Meir says Akoy, the city of Akoy is Eretz Yisrael. It has a din like Eretz Yisrael, Gittin when it comes to Gittin. So Rab Meir says you treat Akoy like Eretz Yisrael. So if you bring a get from Akoy to Eretz Yisrael, you don't have to say b'fani nechta. But maybe get Eretz Yisrael. In Eretz Yisrael, somebody brings a get. Let's say from Yerushalayim to Tel Aviv. Ein et tzarich sheyoma b'fani nechtam. You don't have to say b'fani nechtam. Because in Israel, you don't have to say b'fani nechtam. It's only if you bring it from chutz la'aretz to Eretz Yisrael, you have to say. Now it says, because, what's the reason why if you bring, let's say, a get from Yerushalayim to Tel Aviv, you don't have to say b'fani nechtam? Because v'im yesh olav oirim, and this is an important word, if there is husbands that want to claim that the get was forged, let's say the husband will meet his wife in Tel Aviv and say, hey, the get that you got it from Yerushalayim, it's forged. The people who signed on it are not real people. So then you could verify the signatures. You could either call the people who signed on the get and say, is this your signatures? And then it's so easy to verify and ratify and authenticate a get. So therefore, it's not a problem. You don't have to say b'fani nechta. So this is the Mishnah. And one point I missed from the Mishnah is what Taisha speaks out, that the word get usually means, could be any document is called a get. Document maybe comes from the word get. But the reason why it is the reason why people write only 12 lines on a get, because the gematria of Gimel and Tes is 12. That's why you write 12 lines. Other than that, Taisus learns another reason why you write 12 lines for a get is because the Torah says Sefer Krisis, and the Torah describes a get like a Sefer Torah. And just like there are 4 sections of the Sefer Torah, when you go from Bereshis to Shmos, and Shmos to Vayikra, etc., you have 4. You have 4 lines in between each book of the Sefer Torah, and therefore, since you have 4 spaces, and each one is a space of 4 lines. So and 4 times 3 is 12, because you don't count the space between Bamidbar and Devarim. That doesn't count. So it's 4 times 3 basically, and therefore you have 12 lines. So that's another point, that when they write a get and you Google up an image of a get, you will see it has exactly 12 lines. Okay. So let's get back to the main discussion of this Mishnah, which is that when a person brings a get from Medina Siyam, you have to say b'fani nechtav, b'fani nechtam. The shliach has to say, I saw it being written and I saw it being signed. So the Gemara asks, my Tama, what's the reason why a shliach has to say that? So Rabba says, we go to Beis and Beis, lefi she'ein bekiyim l'shma. The reason is that we assume that the people who wrote the get in the Medina Siyam, let's say in Italy, the person that wrote the get doesn't know that the get has to be written lishma, which means it has to be written for the husband and wife, and it's just can't write, oh, Reuven's divorcing Shimon, and then you have and you buy it off the shelf. And when he writes up the whole get, not just to fill it in, but when he writes up the whole get, he has to be writing it for this woman who's divorcing this woman. And the people in Medina Sayyam may have not been aware. Maybe the Sefer would write up a get and just fill in the names later, like you do in a ksuba, and that's invalid. So this is how do we know you have to write a get lishma? Because the Torah wrote v'chosav la. You have to write it on her, or in her name, lishma. You have to know when you're writing it who you're writing it for. So there's a question: is this a kosher get? So the shliach, by saying I saw it's being written and I saw it being signed, and they'll ask him, oh, you saw it being written and you saw it being signed, do you make sure that when the sofer wrote up the get, was he writing it lishma? And he's going to say yes. So therefore, that's why you have to say b'fani nechta, because it leads into other questions. Rava says the reason why you have to say the shliach has to authenticate, because there's no travel continuous travel, let's say between Eretz Yisrael, and we're using our example, Italy, okay? Maybe there was a boat once every 6 months. So therefore, maybe the husband will come, make one day a trip to Eretz Yisrael, and he's going to say, I never wrote a get. So right away, there's going to be, and there's no, you can't call, where the Eidim that wrote the get that are living in Italy. So it'll cause a big problem. If she got married again, she'll have kids, Mamzerim or whatever, it'll cause a big problem. So therefore, they believe the shliach. If the shliach says, I know for a fact that this husband gave me this get, I saw it being written, I saw it being signed, and the husband handed it over to me to travel to Eretz Yisrael, to give it over to this woman. When he says such a thing, then we will not believe the husband anymore. That's a very important point. Even if the husband comes much later and says, I never gave you this get, the power that the Chachamim gave to the shliach is that when he says b'fani nechtam, it's a kosher get and no questions asked. So now we have 2 reasons of Rabba and Rava why a person has to say b'fani nechtam. So the Gemara asks, my benayu, what will be the difference between the 2 reasons? So the Gemara gives you ika benayu. There is a chilik. There's a big difference if you hold like Rabba or you hold like Rava. The first difference is the Gemara gives you 3 differences. The Asuyu Beitrei. If two people brought, they have 2 shluchim that came from Italy to Eretz Yisrael. So if you have 2 shluchim that brought the get, then that's a big difference. According to Rabbah, you still have a problem. How do you know it was written lishma? So they would have to say b'fani nechtam. According to Rava, they don't have to say b'fani nechtam. Why? Because these 2 shluchim eventually settling in Israel. If months later or years later, the husband comes to Eretz Yisrael and says he never wrote the get, we have two people right there that live in Israel that could come and refute what the husband's saying. So in case where two people brought the get, they don't have to say, according to Rava, b'fani nechtam, b'fani nechtam. Inami, another practical difference is Medina Medina Eretz Yisrael. Let's say Eretz Yisrael is divided by two different countries. Let's say one side is Persian and one side is Greek. They divided Israel. So if you bring from one country to another country in Eretz Yisrael, according to Rabbah, with the whole reason why you have to say b'fani nechtam is because they don't know lishma. Well, since this is Israel, it's one part of Israel to another part of Israel, albeit it's two different countries within Israel. You would not have to say b'fani nechtam because ein b'ki and lishma, and that's only when you come from Medina Siyam. But in Israel, everybody knew the drasha of a chasav law sefer creases, even though it's an obscure drasha. In Israel, they all knew it. It's only in Chutz La'aretz we're thinking that maybe they weren't aware that you have to write it lishma. So therefore, according to Rabbah, you do not have to say. According to Rava, maybe if there's no travel and if there's one person, so we require him to say, because maybe the husband will cross over from one side of Israel to another, and he'll say that the star that I never sent this get. Iname, another reason, another difference is Medina Sayam. If you go, let's say in the United States, you go from New York to California to bring a get. So according to Rava, according to Rabbah, ein bekin lishma. So again, a person who comes from New York to California would have to say b'fani nechta because it's chutz la'aretz and they don't know that you have to write a get lishma. But according to Rava, where the whole reason is because ein eidim mitzuyin l'kaima, it's very hard to get there. Well, if it's in one country, it's one country in Medina Siyam. Travel is easy back and forth. So if the husband will come to California and say he never wrote the get, it's easy to get people from New York to come to California to verify that. So in that case, according to Rava, you will not have to say b'fani nechta or b'fani nechta. So again, a fantastic machlokis of why Chachamim said that you have to say b'fani nechta or b'fani nechta when a shliach comes from Medina Siyam to Eretz Yisrael when he brings a get. According to Rava, because most people in Medina Siyam did not know, they knew other halachas of Gittin that that it has to be not connected to the ground and it has to be 12 lines. Let's say whatever they knew about Gittin, but one thing they did not know was this obscure drasha that it has to be written lishma from top to bottom. So therefore, he's like making it kosher. According to Rabbah, the b'fani nechta is making this a kosher get. According to Rava, it's just the preventive medicine, which is preventing that if the husband comes to say that it's not, I never wrote it. So then you have these edim, the shliach will say b'fani nechta, and we will not believe the husband. So first the Gemara wants to examine what Rabbah's opinion is, and then we'll stop. Rabbah, the amal fisha ein bekin lishma. According to Rabbah, that the whole reason why you say b'fani nechta is because the people who live outside of Israel don't know the concept that a get has to be written lishma. So if so what's the problem? Who is making this a kosher get? The shliach. He's like one person saying that this is a kosher get. Liboya trey. Then you should require two people. Every edis in the Torah, wherever the Torah requires testimony, usually it requires two. Let's say to say somebody loaned money to somebody, or you want to pull money out of somebody, you need two edim. Right, or to kill somebody, or to give malchus, you have two edim. So why over here is one shliach enough to make this get kosher? Answers the Gemara, we do find eid echad ne'eman be'isurim. One eid is believed when it comes to iser, because if one eid says it's kosher, he saw that this was shechted kosher, or he saw that they took out the fats of the animal, so it's a kosher meat. So we believe him. So therefore, here we're dealing with the concept of not of monetary problem issue. It's a isser. It's a prohibition from the Torah. And when it comes to a prohibition of the Torah believed one aid. So the Gemara says, hold it. When do we say that one aid is believed in isser? You have a piece of meat and you don't know if it's the non-kosher fats or it's a kosher piece of meat. There, you believe the one aid. It's not for sure iser. So you don't know it's kosher or not kosher. The eid echad could tell you it is kosher. Over here, to examine this woman, This woman, when this man wants to say that this is a kosher get, you're dealing with a woman that's an Ashes Ish, that she's not permitted to marry anybody. The Takzak, Isura, the Ashes Ish, she's known, we presume that she has the prohibition of a married woman, and therefore she can't, she's a person that has this presumption that she's a married woman. So you want to say with one age to say that this is a kosher get, and now she can get married to whoever she wants. But why don't we say that we should require two people, because it's taxek isur. She's a known presumption, presumed that she's an Ashes Ish. And the Gemara says havedavar shebe'erva. This deals with aroyas, and therefore a marriage. Ve'ein davar shebe'erva pachas mishnayim. We know we have a Gzer Shava that when it comes to arayas, to make something into erva, we need at least two edim. So the question is, why to make this get a kosher get, are we believing one aid? The Gemara answers, Roiv Bekin him. Really, it is a presumptuous kosher get. I don't need the shliach to tell me it's a kosher get. Everybody knows that, most people know that you have to write a get lishma. Even according to Rab Meir, that's always in Yevamis we had it. Rab Meir is always concerned about the minority that of something, and therefore there's a minority group that live in Medina Sayyam that never heard of the drasha that you have to write a get lishma. But Stam Sefra the Dayana Migmagmire, anybody who's in Italy, who's a sofer, who's writing the get, he probably knows and went to yeshiva and knows that it has to be rewritten lishma. So even without the shliach saying anything, it's a kosher get. Rabbanan hu da'atzra. Rabbanan, just for extra measure, required then that the shliach should verbally express that it's a kosher get. So v'hacha over here we go to Gimel Lamed Aleph. Mishum iguna ikila roa rabbanan. In order that to make it easy on the woman to get married, since the Chachamim required the shliach to say b'fanei nechtam, they didn't go so far and say no, it only becomes kosher only if two people bring the get, because then if one person brings the get, or you're going to not allow this woman to get married again. So therefore, they were lenient and said that really, you don't even need anybody. So Chachamim said you do need, because maybe they didn't write lishma. We just want to hear it straight from the shliach. So therefore, one shliach is believed. So the Gemara asks one last question. Hi, kulehu, is this a leniency? Chumrahu, you're going strict. Why? The in matzrach leitrei, if you require two shluchim to come and bring it over, bring the get, and only then, if two people say b'fani nechtam, then it's a kosher get. They also bal ma'aru pasale. Then the husband will not be able to come and dispute that, because he'll be one person. If he comes later to Israel and says, "Oh, I never wrote it this get," or it wasn't written lishma, so then the two people will say, "Hey, it was written lishma." You have two shluchim that contradict what the husband's going to say. But if it's only one shliach, and Chachamim said one shliach is good enough, asi bal ma'aro pasale, maybe the husband will come and he'll make a whole tram. And he'll passel the get by saying it wasn't written lishma. So it'll be one versus one, and therefore you're not gaining anything. So the Gemara answers the final teretz. The Gemara answers a teretz like this: Kevin the Amamar. Since we learned in front of how many people is this shliach going to give over the get? In other words, when he just comes off the boat to Eretz Yisrael, he just doesn't say to her b'fani nechtam. He's going to have to make a public declaration in front of a few people b'fani nechtam. So Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yechanina, chadama b'fnei beis or chadama b'fnei gimel. He makes this proclamation in front of two people or three people, like a bezdin. So since the shliach has to, really look three people in their eye and tell them b'fani nechtam, therefore he must be telling the truth. It's hard to lie. It's hard to lie to one person, but to lie in front of three people, it's much harder. So therefore, Chachamim said that if a person makes that proclamation in front of three people, he is considered like more stronger than he's considered like a powerful like two people. And therefore, if the husband comes later on, we will not believe the husband versus the shliach. Well, the power will go to the shliach, because we have a chazaka, an assumption that he must be telling the truth. That's why Bikara Medik Dayak. The shliach is going to be very, very careful. He's not going to make himself look bad. and therefore, we're going to believe the shliach, even if the husband comes later on and said, "Oh, it wasn't written lishma." Too late. It's too bad because the shliach is more powerful and more believable than you, the husband. So far, we just explained Rabba's opinion of why they required b'fani nechtam when you bring a get from chutz la'aretz. It's because ein bekin lishma, and tomorrow's daf they're going to explain Rava's opinion of lefisha ein edim mitzvah l'kaimon.